Just a couple of things before we jump in. I do want to mention that we are offering something called QPR training, and it's something that's new for us. So I wanted to let the community know and all of you. For those of you who are not familiar with QPR training is essentially like CPR, except that it's an emergency response for somebody that's in crisis. It's for people that don't need to be a mental health professional in order to be able to provide it. So QPR stands for question, persuade, and refer. 3 steps that anyone can learn to help prevent suicide. We are offering free trainings to schools, including SROs. We are currently working with the Orlando Police Department and Orange County Sheriff's Office to train all of their SROs, specifically with youth, on how to go ahead and to implement the QPR training. We're also providing to any type of organization, if you're a government agency, law enforcement, and the general community, anybody that can benefit. This is something that's free. It's something that we did really in response to the crisis that we're seeing for youth. As many of you know, our hospital, or in response to the COVID crisis over this past year, increased our bed count for children dramatically in response to the need here in the community. Part of that, in our support to the community for the youth was becoming a gatekeeper, as they call it, for this training, to be able to train folks in the community that are working with youth to be able to avoid crises. So that is why we were doing this. And if you're interested in having us come out to train you, your school, in fact, actually, I was looking at the list of folks that have registered here, and we have a huge amount of people from the school systems, from Seminole, Orange County. A lot of the mental health district counselors are on here. Thank you guys all for joining. And Osceola. We're happy to come out to any individual school or do it at a higher level, whatever works best for you guys, and so that you can benefit from this training. Okay. Also, I want to point out that we are hiring. We have a bunch of people here on the call. So I felt like it was a good opportunity for us to get the word out that we are hiring for all positions, nurses, mental health techs, therapists, business office. This is a great company to work for. And if you are looking for an awesome job and you have a passion for helping people, this could be an excellent opportunity for you. So please reach out if you're interested in a career here at CFBH. A couple of housekeeping items before we jump in. So today's webinar is going to be 1 hour long, including Q&A, which Dr. Lacey will open up at the end of the presentation when she's ready. All participants are going to be muted, so I encourage everybody to please use the chat function or the Q&A function. If you have questions, I'll curate questions throughout the webinar, and towards the end, I'll provide them to Dr. Lacey. The webinar is being recorded. So if you weren't able to make it today, or if you have somebody that you think could benefit, it will be available for streaming on our resources page of our website. Sometime next week, it will be posted. Also, very important, when the presentation ends, you're going to be taken to a Google survey, which is an evaluation for the webinar, for the training, the CE evaluation. So it looks like kind of like a pop-up, or it looks like it's something that you probably shouldn't be going to, but it's not something that's trying to sell you anything. It's actually, you're meant to, when you close out your Zoom, it's going to automatically take you there, and go ahead and fill out this survey. I'll send out the link as well in a follow-up email, but you will automatically be brought there to fill out the survey when the Zoom box closes. Eligible attendees, if you provided your license number during the registration, you will receive 1 CE of you for participating, and we will have that posted in CE Broker within 60 days. And finally, certificates of completion will be emailed to all attendees following the end of this webinar. I'll include that in the email that I send following, along with some additional resources per the presentation. And then lastly, I'd like to introduce Dr. Janie Lacey, our speaker. Dr. Janie Lacey is a relationship trauma expert, psychotherapist, TV commentator, and owner of Life Counseling Solutions in Mainland, Florida. She is a nationally recognized expert in the field of relationship trauma and has been featured on Good Therapy, Your Tango Daily, Buzz, Fox, ABC, CBS, CNN, NBC, Spectrum News, and many other media outlets. She is also a faculty member with the International Institute of Trauma and Addiction Professionals, and an entrepreneur who took her counseling business from a solo practice to a group specialty practice. Her accolades and awards include Onyx Magazine's 2020 Woman on the Move, Orlando Magazine 2019 Woman of the Year and African American Chamber of Commerce of Central Florida 2018 Enterprise Business of the Year. Janie is the host of her syndicated Voice America show called Let's Talk About It with Janie Lacey, which can be found in Alexa, iHeart, iTunes, Spotify, and Spreaker. And with that, Dr. Lacey, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being with us. We all appreciate hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Berman. We certainly appreciate you and Central Florida Behavioral Hospital. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And while I'm doing that, if you can type into the chat, if you are a parent or if you are a mental health professional or you're both, if you could go ahead and chat, put that in the chat so I know who is here. All right. All right, Mr. Berman, if you can just let me know if everything looks good on your side as far as my screen goes. But as he mentioned, I am Dr. Janie Lacey. I'm the owner, co-founder of Life Counseling Solutions. And, you know, when I think about back to school anxiety, not only am I a parent of a fourth grader who is in school as we speak, but also as a mental health professional. And we know, as I'm seeing all the comments, good morning to everyone. I see that there's a variety of parents, of people from school districts, mental health workers, and so on. So glad that you are all here because this is a very important topic. And less than an hour doesn't even give us enough to really touch the surface of this topic. But we know when we look at the last year that we have seen a tsunami of mental health issues. And our children more than ever have been affected. And as I think through my own journey with my fourth grader and his anxiety or his feelings and his thoughts about going back to school and having those conversations. And now today's his fourth day of the fourth grade. And every single morning we have certain practices as I help prepare him and equip him with his days ahead. And I'm going to share some of those as we continue to talk about this topic. I was looking at some of your comments here. See who's in the room. Good stuff, good stuff. So I'm going to just take us on a journey this morning and touch some of the more important topics as we either have our own children that have gone back to school or we are working through with parents or with children in our professional practices and in school. But we're going to go through how to recognize the signs of, in particular, back to school anxiety and what can we do to support our kids' mental health. And a common question that I'm often asked is, when is it time to seek professional help? So I'm going to give you some of my thoughts on that as well. And then our practical self-care strategies for busy parents. Because I'm going to tell you without a doubt, not only as a business owner, CEO, a parent, with all the different hats that I wear personally, I know this without a doubt that my son's mental health is affected by mine. So it's important, especially for those of us that are parents or that are those of us that are in the helping space, that we feed ourselves first and that we take a check on our own mental health and our own anxiety, because sometimes we can only help those that are in front of us, especially our children, to the degree that we have helped ourselves. And I'm not going to mince my words about that, because I'll see many times that parents will try to help their children, or as professionals will try to help, and we are not even taking care of ourselves. So please take care of yourself. Make sure that you are filled up so that you are giving from that place of abundance and from that place of self-care. And I'm going to give you a couple of tips. And then when we open it up at the very end for question and answers, I would love to hear some of your tips on how you take care of yourself, not about a theory, but how do you take care of yourself so that you can better serve those that are in front of you, that you can better be a better parent, so that all the things that I'm about to share, you can do it with excellence and diligence because you're putting yourself first, that oxygen mask, like the airplane first. But first, let's talk about when we think about the challenges that our students have faced this year. I mean, they are on a spectrum. There's a variety depending on their age, depending on their situations, just depending on a lot of things. But in generally speaking, our children have experienced a change in social skills, right? They went from in class, they went from playing sports, looking forward to engaging with their friends, to complete lockdown. And in my case, my son's an only child, so only home with parents and no other siblings, no other kids, right? So their social skills had changed, and it went from play dates in person to play dates virtually, right? So we really think about not only that our lives change and us having to hold it down, especially those of us that were in the mental health space or the healthcare space, we're trying to take care of our own mental health, adjust to changes, and be there for our children as they had many challenges this past year. And another part, fear of failure. You know, I have a funny joke, but it's not funny. You know, I remember when I was doing, I now never in my life until most of us probably experienced this last year, then had to become an at-home teacher, substitute teacher, virtual teacher, all those things for our children. And I remember my son had looked at me one day and he's like, "Mom, you are the best teacher I've ever had." And I'm like, "Oh, really? Oh, I just felt so good about that." And then he said, "Because you're so lenient." And then of course I was like, okay, that's not good. But what I realized in that is that we were given, or me as a parent was given, a torch to help him succeed, to help him stay on top of his math, his spelling, and all the things that wasn't well equipped for. I didn't think I was well equipped for. So coming back to school, what we've seen not only as parents, but as children, as teens, is having anxiety around fear of failure. You know, and we've seen, and this is not my opinion, the numbers show that there has been a drop in grades and in certain areas in particular, when we move from those that may have spent the past year doing virtual school, or us as parents, now we've become homeschool teachers. And then another area that we've seen a major challenge for our students this past year was friendship breakdown. Right. So if you're a parent and you've had these conversations with your kids, you'll see that some of them are worried about not seeing their friends, or, you know, I wonder if so-and-so is still my friend, and just having anxiety around their friendships. I know one of the things that I did personally was I tried to be very proactive, especially with my son being an only child, and having virtual play dates and virtual video game play dates, tried to be as creative as possible. And then anxiety about health in the future. There is no doubt that our children, and many of you that are watching this webinar, have experienced death in your family. You yourself have gotten COVID. Someone that you've known at a distance, a colleague, a coworker, a boss, a neighbor, someone's health has been affected by the COVID-19 and now the new variants. And then there's anxiety about the future. How is this going to affect my grades? How is this going to affect my friendship? How is this going to affect my sports? How is this going to affect my performance? How is this going to affect my family, right? There's so many different anxieties that have popped up that we haven't dealt with in this type of capacity in our history. And then there's grief. There's the grief. And then we've had racism. I'm going to break some of these down because I think it's important for us to understand from our children's perspective. You know, we've dealt with racism being a topic for this past year, bullying, peer pressure, all the different challenges that we've experienced on top of each other, or one after each other. When we think about the social skills in particular, as I mentioned, during this pandemic, there's been less face-to-face social interaction, and there's been increased feelings of social anxiety. And most people, and you can put in the chat if your student has maintained virtual learning, even if there was a back to school option, because many parents took that option to continue to keep their families and their students at home while there was an option to go back to school. And that was a family choice. And I think every family had to make that decision for themselves. But reacclimating socially has caused a lot of anxiety. And for some kids, from what I've heard from many of the families that we work with, didn't even want to go back to school, right? So there's just a gamut of how how our children have experienced social skills and how their desire to even go back to in-school classes. And then that fear of failure. You know, when we think about our students, they feel that pressure academically anyway. And as well as when it comes to sports and all the extra curriculum activities that we have. But we really think about from our students' perspective, on top of our own, you know, all the extra stress and all the things that they may have, or we as parents have been concerned about them becoming behind academically, behind in any type of skills or things that they potentially were mastering before. It's a real fear. And then going back to that friendship breakdown, especially for our school age kids, that many of them didn't see their friends for over a year, maybe more. Some of them are just now seeing their friends, as some of them are returning back to in-school classes this particular week here in Florida. And then after a year of that virtual learning and physical distancing, their kids are worried about their friendships, and will so-and-so still be their friend when they go back? How are they going to interact, and where do they pick up on? So we have to be that guide for our children, age appropriately, depending on what their concerns are around their friendship. And we know that the COVID-19 vaccinations are offered to protect against the threat. And we also know that's not available for some students under 12, but now we have the Delta variant, and the COVID-19 continues to spread. So as we hear the numbers, we're hearing about the hospitals not having enough beds. All these things are coming about as our kids are going back to school. And if they're hearing the news, they're hearing our conversations, that can contribute to their own anxiousness, their own worry about what's going to happen. And this is why I always recommend as parents, and this is something I practice wholeheartedly, what I preach, so to speak, is we have to be careful around the conversations that we have in front of our children. We can get comfortable as parents, and we can just have these conversations, on the phone with our friends or professionally, and be sharing our opinions or our thoughts, but those little ears, or those ears, are hearing us, and that's going to affect them. We still are the number one influence on our children. So they're worried about those potential interruptions. Am I going to have soccer practice this year? Am I going to be able to play football? Am I going to be able to have my after school activities? These are all real things. And especially if they don't talk about them, we want to be able to check in on how they're doing. But first, give ourselves that oxygen mask. And that grief, having those conversations and having the support in place for our kids, especially ourselves, if we ourselves have not been directly impacted as far as grief, when they go back to school, their friend could have lost a grandparent, could have lost a parent, right? So we want to be able to have these conversations in a way that's helpful and that can ease their anxiety, because there's a lot of people that have lost their loved ones due to COVID-19, and they still may be grieving when they go back to school. Then our children may be around them, or our children may be that child that is grieving, because it's important for us to be able to talk about it. And because if we don't, what we'll see is they will be affected by how they cope, and those lasting symptoms can pop up later. So we have opportunities to help them as we are all experiencing it. And then racism, in this past year, there has been an increased attention on acts of racism, as well as an increase in anti-Asian hate crimes, the Black Lives Matter movements, all these different things that we've all experienced last year. And students of color may be worried about prejudice or discrimination and racism at their school, especially if they're a minority. And it's never too early to talk to our children about racism, because what I've experienced is some parents will say, and I'm speaking generally, that this doesn't apply to our kids, or I'm sheltering my kids from this. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having these conversations that affected all of us this particular year. When we sit back and think about it, as you hear and looking at my slides, think about this. We've went through a lot, not only as adults, but our kids as well. And then we have bullying and peer pressure. That has always been a concern for our students, but students may now worry about additional factors, right? Last week, I did a segment for Fox 35 about the concerns about bullying around mask wearing, like those that are choosing to wear masks and those that are not choosing to wear masks, and how that's going to affect our children with the governor's order with giving vouchers for kids to be able to go to other schools. So these are conversations that we want to lean in on our kids or the families that we're working with, and asking them, how do you feel about wearing a mask? It is amazing to me how many parents, and I'm saying this as a parent, where we don't even ask our kids, how do they feel about it, right? Because we're so concerned about our own opinions, our own political thoughts, and we get so much into that we forget that the best support system that we can give our kids is us. And that means that we can remove our judgment, that we can remove trying to change their reality, and we lean in to first figure out, like, what do they even think about all this, so that we'll know where we need to help them at and where they may be okay. If we don't lean in, we won't know that. So we want to know what their internal struggles are, and if they have any feelings of guilt, if they're wearing a mask to school and they're sitting next to their friend or a student next to them who's not wearing a mask. So I'm going to go through in a very general sense, how do we recognize back to school anxiety? For most people, we have now had our kids, as I mentioned, my son's been in school now for 4 days. And every single day I'm having conversations with him. And I know the best way to communicate with him is to not overwhelm him and ask him very simple questions, and removing my commentary around it, because that allows him the space to open up and share more. And I want to be able to hear his thoughts and his experiences. So a couple of things around children and their anxiety, a couple of things you want to pay attention to is, how are they sleeping in that back to school? I'm a big believer that we keep a close routine, as close as possible, when they're not in school. And I just kind of adjust it a little bit when he's going back to school. So this way, by having these routines and having things already in place, I'll be able to see if there is any type of disturbances, and I can lean in. So one of the ways that we kind of look at anxiety in children is we're looking at their sleep pattern and their disturbances in sleep. And then we're also looking at is there's defiance or irritability that's not normally there, and their lack of concentration. Is there less energy, loss of appetite? We're looking at any type of physical manifestations of symptoms like nausea, muscle tension, or dizziness. Or do they just outright refuse to go to school and give you resistance around going to school? Or is there sadness or crying when they're going back to school? So I know one of the things that I had did with my son is I asked him about how he felt about even going back to school. And he had said, so-so, right? So I said, well, what does so-so mean? He said, well, I'm looking forward to seeing my friends, but I'm not looking forward to doing all the schoolwork, right? So I wouldn't have known exactly what so-so meant if I didn't lean in a little bit, if I didn't quick to give him my thoughts or my commentary. So we want to be able to understand what their thoughts are around going to school. And if they're refusing to go to school, we want to be able to understand what that is by asking the right questions, and us as the support system, as parents or professionals, the demeanor and the attitude in which we ask these questions in a non-judgmental way, so that we can create an environment of openness and connection so that they can trust us. I have this slide in here because as you're listening and watching this webinar, I want you to think about your own levels of anxiety. Because if we deny or we can't even recognize our own levels of anxiety, it will be a little bit more challenging to recognize them in our children or the families that we serve. So make sure that you also take care of yourself so that you can better help your children, or you can better help those that you're working with in the school district, or that you're better able to help with after school programs. So you can see some of these quick examples that I have here: the overthinking, avoidance, stomach issues, panic attacks, it's a lack of patience, or trouble concentrating, our body insomnia, memory issues. So think about, if you have anxiety issues, how do you take care of yourself? And what are the ways that you self-soothe? What are the ways that you help yourself so that you can create that window of tolerance? That window of tolerance is going to help you better be able to be there for those that you serve in your community, in your families, and beyond. So a couple of things. What can you do to really support your kids' mental health? Our mental health issues, which is a great thing, in my opinion, that is now on the forefront more than ever. We still have some ways to go, but to talk about that importance of every single one of us, whether we're a professional or not, we have to take care of our mental health, and we have to understand it. So how do we validate and listen When our children or those that we're working with, we have to be able to give them the space to feel safe, to have their opinions, their feelings, their thoughts. And we, whether parents or professionals, we don't change their reality. We're not quick to reassure them, because sometimes I'll also see we'll be quick to reassure them because we want to help them understand that they're okay. But when we haven't really heard and created that system of really validating whatever their concerns are first. And then we want to be able to help them focus on what they can control. And we're not going to be able to really do that in a way that's going to be impactful unless we first validated and really heard what their concerns are. So remember to, in order to really be able to help them focus on what they can control, we have to start by validating and listening to really what's inside them, and doing that in a safe, consistent way. If we're consistent with them, then the more that they share, the more that they're going to know that they're safe. And the more that they know that they're safe, the more they're going to be able to open up. And the more that they're able to open up, then we're going to be able to help them move through any anxious or worried feelings that may come up in this transitional time. And we want to help them feel prepared. Right. So in my personal conversations with my son, we talked about mask wearing, we talked about hand washing, and did all the reminders and some of the self-care techniques that he has to do while he's in school, because I'm not there with him. So to give him the preparation and to give him the reminders of all the things that he wants to do to make sure that he feels safe, secure, and that he's empowered. And the way that we do that is first understanding what their concerns are. And then encouraging the overall physical health. In our family, we like to take daily walks and just making sure that there's sleep and just doing great things to take care of ourselves. So we want to encourage them as well. And then we want to have routines. I'm a big believer that when especially kids suffer from anxious feelings or diagnosable anxiety, giving them routines will take out some of the worry, because they know what to expect. And that can be basic things in their routine at home, whether it's nighttime routine, whether it's eating routine, whether it's their homework routine when they come from school, is try to create as much of a routine as possible, because they know what to expect and everyone is on the same page. Another area, teaching stress reducing activities. I'm going to go through this a little bit more here in a minute, but every child, I believe, needs to have stress reducing activities. So let's go through some of these. So stress reducing activities can be around their hobbies, right? So there's other ways that when they're home, not just putting them in front of, I know last year, like many parents, I feel like my son had too much screen time, but I gave myself a grace as we were all dealing with the pandemic. But to support their hobbies, getting them outside, because these are all things that are going to help them reduce a lot of stress in their life. If they're moving their bodies, they're doing things that are fun, they're doing things also that they want to do. My son likes to play video games, and I allow him to play video games within reason and within time structure, but I also will play with him. It's not necessarily something that I would prefer to do, but it's something that he likes to connect with his parents over. So support their hobbies. And that's one way that you can support their hobbies. Or if they like to play basketball, go out and play basketball with them. If they want to go out and jump on their trampoline, jump on the trampoline with them, but show that you support their hobbies by engaging and showing interest in whatever they're interested in. And we also want to resist the urge to rescue our child socially. Many times we want to go in and fix the problem, because sometimes it also has to do, especially for parents, because of our own anxiety. Our own anxiety, if we just go ahead and quickly fix the issue, we go in and rescue it, then it's gone. Then our anxiety is taken care of, which is why it's so important for me to continue to stress to you to take care of your own anxiety, your own worry, so that you can have a higher bandwidth to be there for your children or the people that you work with in particular. And another way that we can show our kids support around mental health is encouraging them and celebrating their wins. Sometimes I feel like we don't necessarily do that enough, because I think sometimes we have this environment where we overly celebrate them for doing things that should be expected, like brushing your teeth. But when they're doing things, especially during this time of going through everything that we've gone through, us being more encouraging and celebrating their wins. My son is in karate, and every little thing that he feels like he masters is I'm making sure I'm telling him how proud I am and how great he was. And while I'm there in his practices, I can be on my phone. It's real easy to do that, right, as parents, but to show him when he's turning around that I'm looking at him, that I'm engaged, that's also showing encouragement, that you're interested in what they're doing. So what I would also stress, and I say this as a parent myself who can struggle with this, is that when our kids are in our present, we want to make sure that we are present. As I mentioned, his karate practice or the different activities that he has going on, it's real easy to answer that text message ding that comes through, but to be deliberate, to take that 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So when he's turning around, he sees me engaged and encouraging him by my enthusiasm and saying good job when he's looking at me in his karate practice. And that can translate to many different areas. And we don't realize how much that goes a long way. Because sometimes what I'll see, and I'm saying this as a parent as well, is that we're so preoccupied with our own life and what we have going on that we can miss those special moments, that in that moment, our action is what's encouraging. Our action is what is celebrating their win. So be present. And I encourage you all this weekend, our phone and our text message, our work, and they will always be there. But once the moment is missed, it's missed, right? And for those of you, as you are parents and your kids continuously get older, and we have that moment where we stop and look at them, we're like, man, where did the time go? Right? So let's always keep that in mind. And then if our kids' mental health, if we see challenges that are prolonged and that we're doing all the things that we possibly can do to support them as a parent, as a support system, that sometimes it may be important to seek mental health and to seek mental health professionals. And when we're doing that, I think how the message that we send to our children around mental health professionals, or if we're seeking services outside of us as parents, to let them know that it's normal, that when we get sick, we go to the doctor to have him examine us to see if we need medicine for our cold, right? So you normalize the mental health support. And I think sometimes we don't do that enough for our kids. So if they feel like they have to go seek mental health professionals, that there's something wrong with them. And many times that can also come back from the messaging that they've received beforehand. So languaging around how we deal with anxiety, language how we dealt with the pandemic, language around how we dealt with racism, the political climate, all of these things in the comfort of our own homes. We have to remember that we were setting an example and we were downloading information to our children on how they can see the world and what their beliefs were going to be. So our self-awareness, not only as professionals, as parents, is pivotal, because we also know as mental health professionals and those in the school district, is as professional as we want to be, if we're not taking care of and checking ourselves, we can easily have transference issues and try to influence those that we're serving one way or another. And we know that's a real issue. So take care of yourself, because when we take care of ourselves, when we can validate and truly listen to their concerns. So we want to check in with them frequently and again, listen to their concerns. And the reason why I stress this is to validate and listen to their concerns, because that to me sometimes could be 80% of what our children need. Right? When we look at those birthrights, the birthrights, children need to be seen, heard, right? And valued. So we look at all those things. And I know from an old school mentality, growing up in my home, the messaging was children were seen, but they were not heard. Right? So now when we think about, when we let our children know, and I'm saying children, teens, we're letting our young people know that they're important by how we present to them our interest in their opinions, how they feel, and being able to put our feelings and our thoughts and wanting to fix and correct and to change their reality in a box, truly be present. I cannot stress that part enough. But many times we can't do that as parents, or sometimes even professionals, until we've done it for ourselves, until we've had that emotional bandwidth, until we take care of ourselves, until we are not working to medicate and to not deal with the things that we need to deal with in our life. Because this past year, we've seen that happen more than ever. We've been maximized with work. We've been maximized with mental health issues, physical issues, constantly pivoting. So, and then our children get lost in the shuffle. So take care of yourself, because we're able to then really truly validate their feelings and letting them know that their feelings and frustrations are understandable. And that's the validation part. rather than dismiss a child's anxiety about their social situations or academic stress. Oh, you'll be okay. Things will be fine. We're all okay, right? Even though we're trying to be positive and we're trying to go ahead and let them know things are okay, sometimes, depending on the timing and what's happening in the conversation, that can be felt like we're dismissing their feelings and we're sending the message that their feelings don't matter. And I'm not talking about a one-off. I'm talking about if that's our consistent way of dealing with our children that we're working with in the school district, or if we're working with professionally or in our own home. Let them know that they matter. Even if we don't necessarily see it their way, we don't have to, or agree with what they're saying, is give them the space and time to express it. So you can say things like, I know you're worried about being around that many people again, but what are you most concerned about? Right? So you're validating and then you're asking a question. You ask a question rather than make a statement. And then we help them focus on what they can control, right? So during a time of so much uncertainty, helping them focus on what they're controlling, sometimes we can say that is, what do you feel like, Rylan, are the things that when you go back to school that you can control, right? And then sitting back and hearing what he has to say. And then for health fears, some of this can be helping them understand, as I did with my own son, about hand washing, practicing physical distancing. My son has a face mask. If he wants to not wear it at school, I also have given him that as a choice for him. And that was my choice to do so. But he chooses on his own to wear his face mask. And I was glad that I gave him that choice, because he made the choice that he's able to do, and he's not being forced by me. And that works well for our family. And then there's for social concerns. This can mean that focusing on our own interactions with and treatment of others. Again, this goes back to our conversations. What are we playing in our households, or even in the school district? What are we saying to our children around our own feelings, our own opinions? Because we have power in the influence. And in the influence is sometimes we have to hold back on our own thoughts about things that have happened this year with COVID-19, with the racism, and a lot of different things that was going on. Because if we're leading with our opinion and we're leading with our own thoughts, and it's going to influence them, and especially if they feel differently, they're not going to share with us. And if they don't share with us, then we're not going to be able to support them or help them. And then they're going to suppress any anxious feelings inside. So I know that many of us, again, have already had our children in school this week, but there are a couple tips that you can do to help them prepare, or help them feel prepared rather, is explaining to them what we know about the school year and the classroom. This is facts, or the classroom would look like, to help them mentally prepare. So if your children are concerned about the virus, is talking to them about, hand sanitizers availability, hand washing, that the classroom is socially distanced, that your teacher's going to be wearing a mask, whatever the facts are for your particular school district, or whatever the facts are that your protocols will be, is to be able to help them prepare for what they're experiencing. And I know for us as a family, there was a meet the teacher day. So, my son was able to see what the classroom was going to be like. He was going to see the distancing, was able to see all the different ways in which they are having protocols for their back to school. So that helped him feel prepared when he went back on Tuesday. Encouraging that overall physical health. And I'm a big believer is that we have to be the model, right? So do we have a sleep routine? Do our children see us sleeping? Do they see us taking care of ourselves? And are we making them eat healthy food, but we're not, right? And this is defined by each family. But there's no doubt, this is not just my opinion, right? There is research that backs this up. Our sleeping habit, our diet habits, our physical habits, it all contributes to the support of our healthy body and our healthy mind. So to be able to have a tolerance level, we know kids are resilient, but to have a tolerance level for stress, not only for ourselves, to be gatekeepers, to be leaders, to be supporters, we have to take care of ourselves. And there's a spectrum, but you want to make sure and check your own habits, so that when we are encouraging and we are talking to our children or those that we're serving, we're also being a role model in the areas that we are encouraging them to do. And those routines are so important. So those daily routines, that brings consistency and structure, which can help minimize the feelings of anxiety. So check around whether you as a parent or you're helping families, is sometimes we overlook the basics. And sometimes the basics is that daily routine and the consistency and the structure, which can lessen worry and anxiety in particular. and a couple things that we can teach as far as really targeting stress reducing activities in particular. I know with my son and teaching him stress reducing activities, and yes, he's a complete therapist son. So, I have the Insight Timer app. So we use the Insight Timer app before going to bed and having meditation. There's also Calm, there's Headspace that have specific protocols or meditation parts for just for children, right? So they're a little bit shorter. Some of them are 5 minutes, 2 minutes. So you can teach your children, depending on age appropriateness, how to take deep breaths, how to do meditation or prayer, exercise, stretching. So I teach my son every morning when he gets up to stretch his body, right? So these are routines that we are sowing into him as a very young man. So hopefully they will carry him through his life to be able to have his own stress reducing activities. And there are many others. And if there are others that you can think of, please go ahead and put them in the chat so that we can all glean from your experiences as far as stress reducing activities for kids or for teens. These are just a few that I wanted to put up here, as well as the support of the hobbies, right? We want to encourage our children to do more of what they enjoy most. And I'm reiterating this important because sometimes we can miss this point. It's about what they want appropriately. And then we join some of their activities to support them, whether it's reading or playing outside or other activities. I know one of the most beautiful moments that I had as a parent was a couple of times, especially this past year, where I was reading, because I read 10 pages a day. I was doing a program called 75 Hard, and part of that program was making sure we read 10 pages a day as part of our checklist for that program. And I was able to look and see my son was starting to follow suit. When I would read, he would go read, and it was completely on his own, because before that was a struggle. It was like, okay, have you did your 20 minutes of reading today? And you can't turn on your iPad until you do your reading. So it was constantly me having to negotiate with him to get his reading done. So what I realized was the things that I wanted him to do became his own hobby because he saw me demonstrate those in particular. I modeled it for him. And we want to, again, resist the urge to rescue our child socially. So, if our child has social anxiety, and we've known this, and they've had that even before what has happened this past year, everything can become more magnified with this past school year. So re-entering the school setting, again, we want to rescue them. We want to take the uncomfortable situations for them. Sometimes, and each family has to make decisions for themselves, right? Because there are lots of families that have chosen to actually go the homeschooling route as a result of what has happened, and realize that they can do it, and that's their choice. So I'm talking about something different, is that we're going in and we want to rescue them versus coming alongside of them and being that Yoda for them and helping coach them, helping understand them. I mean, those are the opportunities and the seeds that we plant in our children for a lifetime, by not putting on the pants for them, by teaching them and telling them how to put the pants on one leg at a time. And I think I've stressed enough about validating our child's anxiety, and also showing them that we believe in them and their ability to work through the discomfort. So as we validate them, we also want to encourage them. A couple other things I just want to share about showing encouragement and celebrating their wins. We can do some simple things, and these are practices that I do in my own family. Is we want to send positive, encouraging notes in our child's lunch or backpack. So I put a little note, just enough that he's not embarrassed, that says, "Mama loves you. Can't wait to see you after school." Right? So we can do small actions, especially during this first couple of weeks, to show our children that we're there for them, that we love them, that we feel special. And after this first week, if there's anything that was a special achievement during this next school year, we can plan. I know my son's returning to some activities that he's excited about. So there's things that you can plan as far as celebrations. You can start routines as far as a favorite dinner tonight, Friday, or next week. You can have movie nights or special activities together. So, and this could be part of the routine, or it can be part of encouragement or celebrating them. I'm so glad that you had such a great week of school. I know that you had anxiety this week going back with everything that's going on in the world. How about let's watch a movie tonight, and I'll let you pick the movie, right? It could be something as simple as that, and that you incorporate it in your life with them, but by showing them encouragement and that you've been proud of them, and you're celebrating the small wins with this transition back to school. We've already mentioned, do not hesitate to get professional help if it continues and our children have difficult coping. But the messaging that we send around mental health support, or the messaging that we send around giving them options to, or that we are going to have them go to a professional, it's important that creates a level of openness and letting them know that it's okay, that sometimes, I can give you the over-the-counter medicine when you have a cough, but sometimes when you're feeling a little bit worse, there's only so much I can do. And I know that I ask for help when I need help. So I want us as a family to get some extra help and some support as we go through this season, as we go through this transition. So our language and the messaging that we send around them, I cannot stress, is important enough. So, if our child has anxiety and it's interfering with their sleep, their eating, their socializing, or even their school attendance, again, they don't want to go to school and they are resistant to that. And that persists beyond a few days or even a few weeks. You want to start with your pediatrician, or a recommendation to start with the pediatrician, make sure there's nothing physically wrong. And then the family or the family mental health provider. So I'm going to just kind of end, and then I'm going to open this up for question and comments as we near the 10 o'clock hour. But practicing self-care strategies for the busy parents. And these are a lot of things that I like to do myself. And one of the things that I'll do personally, since I know a lot of people, when I say this, they're like, "Oof, I get up each morning at 4:30. So I get up at 4:30 because I'm a big believer that we give the first fruits of the day to ourselves. So my son will normally get up between 6:30 and 7. So I have that time not only to do the things that I want to do, the journaling, the stretching, getting my coffee, reading, or I'll participate in a Clubhouse social media app room called Breakfast with Champions. I mean, these are all self-care activities for me. So as not only as parents and professionals, I mean, when you think about how you got up this morning, think about it for a minute. Did you jump out of the bed, rush? Did you hit that snooze button? Right? So then when it came time to get your children up, or it came time to be in your office or at work, that you were frazzled, that you're stressed because you didn't have a good start to your day. So you don't necessarily have to get up at 4:30 each morning like I do, right? Because I try to go to bed as earlier as possible. So you'll usually catch me in bed anywhere between 10 and 11 each night, because that's part of my routine. So think about, what are your self-care strategies, especially if you are a busy parent or if you're helping busy parents. So one of the things that I love is to journal. Give myself those 20 minutes of that free flow. Sometimes you don't have to do free flow. So in the morning, as I'll do gratitude. So I write 5 things that I'm grateful for each morning, right? And I also will recap that in the evening of what were the things that I was grateful for in the day. And I don't really think about what's happening the next day. I'll do that during that time window in the morning, when I think about, okay, what are the 3 things that I wanted to accomplish today, Friday? And I write those things out, even though I have a long to-do list. Believe me, I have a long to-do list, but I only focus on the things that I know are my priority and that I want to accomplish. And I recommend 3 to 5 things, because most busy parents have an issue with being overwhelmed. And being overwhelmed sometimes for me is an efficiency challenge as us as parents, right? So I look at myself as not only a business owner, a licensed psychotherapist, but all the different hats that I wear. And when people ask me, well, how do you still have time to, do this or do that? It's efficiency and priorities, right? So if we want to get a good start and we want to train and help our children navigate this world, we have to be in the best position to be able to do that. And sometimes that means, and not in a selfish way, that we have to put ourselves first. We got to take care of ourselves first. And turning on, another thing that I do, and please put in the chat things that you do, is turn on uplifting music. So before I have a presentation, as I'm getting ready to get on here with you guys, as I'm setting up my office and because I'm going straight with clients afterwards, I'm listening to uplifting music. I'm just enjoying that space and that time as I'm getting things and getting my mic and all this stuff set up. So there's lots of times where you can create an environment of things that you feel good about. And then scheduling, I like to occasionally just schedule that time with friends or people that are supportive, going out to coffee or dinner or talking on the phone or going for a walk and talk. Like, what are the things that you do to take care of yourself so that you feel fulfilled and you're not putting yourself last because you're taking care of everyone else? Couple other things that I do in particular is I love adult coloring books. There's plenty of them out there, and you know, for a while I was getting these things as gifts for Christmas and all this other stuff, and I'm like, you know, what am I going to do with these things? So last year I decided, when I was home, obviously like many of us, is I got out these adult coloring books. I had a stack of them that I would be getting for different gifts from colleagues or for Christmas or whatever, and I realized, you know what, this is actually pretty neat, and now I like it. So now occasionally, my son doesn't like to color anymore, but he was coloring, then I can able to get that coloring book out with him last year and be right there with him, and being able to have that conversation. And I took my time. So now I have these beautiful things that I can also reflect back that I did during my time of the stressful year last year to take care of myself. And I am a big believer in breathing. And I do the 4 square breathing, and I use the insight timer. So there's breathing apps and those types of things, just to take some time, you know, even if it's 5 minutes for yourself. Turn off TV, turn off, you know, get quiet, get in a space where you can just hear yourself breathing. And many of us don't even take the time to do that. We have shallow breaths, we're hustling through the day, and then we're on to the next thing. We're not present with their kids. So these things help us tap in each and every day to live presently, to be self-aware, and to really be able to recall the conversations that we had. So if you're a parent and you think about, what was the conversation that you had with your child when they came home from school yesterday, or they were on the bus? Or were you so preoccupied that you can only have bits and pieces recall from that conversation? So all of these things and taking care of ourselves help us to truly be present. So I'm going to open it up for questions, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. But again, I'm Dr. Janie Lacey, and please stay in touch. You can find me at Janie Lacey or at Life Counseling Solutions on all the outlets, and our websites are Janie Lacey and Life Counseling Solutions.
All right, thank you so much, Janie. Thank you so much for an awesome presentation. Particularly, I really loved how you talked about how, you know, taking care of yourself is so important for the self-care of the kids themselves. I think a lot of people forget that. Particularly, I thought your analogy for the mask wearing, where we're all, you know, it's become a very politicized issue, and we're not taking the time to really talk to the kids. How do you feel about it? I just think that's so important, and I think you hit that nail on the head. Does anybody have any questions? Any questions in the room? Please feel free to enter them into the chat. I will ask Janie, is there a way for us to stay in touch with you? LinkedIn or Facebook or?
Yep, absolutely. So I'm on, I know my last name was misspelled on here, but it's Lacy. So you can find me on any of the outlets at Janie Lacey, Lacy, any of the social media outlets, our website. And I see just 2 questions that I'll answer here. That what to do if the child calls home from school to be picked up and says their stomach aches. You know, my initial thought, without having the context of that, is to pick them up from school. Is that if they're calling and they're saying their stomach aches, is to respond to them. And then when they're home, then that's when you can use some of the things that we've talked about from a high level, is to lean in, to validate their experience, and to not necessarily punish them, but to lean in and to create a safe space for them, because that can be a symptom to what we're talking about, anxiety or something that's happening in school that they've not yet been able to verbalize how to address. So, I mean, if it becomes a reoccurring situation where they're asking to be picked up from school, then that's a different situation. But, you know, if a child is asked to be picked up from school, I would just say, without having all the context, to respond to that in a loving, caring, concerned way. And then when you have them at home, then you can always go ahead and lean in and validate, listen to them, and support them. And then another question I see is, how can time in the car to and from work or driving kids to and from school be used efficiently in terms of self-care for the adults and checking in and connecting with peers? You know, that is to me the most valuable time. I have to drive my son to school, to and from school each day. And it's the most valuable time because you have a captive audience. So I do my best to not be on the phone, to not, you know, deal with business or things that I have going on. It's a 15-minute drive to school. And a couple of things that we do is I ask him, And depending on the age of the child, we want to not overwhelm them. And I know my son, if I ask too many questions, he gets overwhelmed. So I don't ask a lot of questions, but one of the things I'll ask him is, what is he looking forward to today in school? And then based off of what he answers is I just mirror back what he says. So if he says, oh, I'm looking forward to recess, or I'm looking forward to seeing such and such friend, I'm like, oh, okay, so you're looking forward to going to recess and playing with your friends, and you're looking forward to connecting with so-and-so. Just like basic communication, right? McDonald's, you say, I want a cheeseburger and fries. So you want a cheeseburger and fries, right? Because that little validation is letting them know, or that little mirroring is letting them know that you hear them. And something else that I do personally in my family is I have my son, I'm a big believer is that we are downloading things and self-care. So I have him state 3 affirmations, and he states the same 3 simple affirmations each time before I drop him off. So if you were watching us in our car, I would say, I'm like, well, sweetie, I'm like, what's your affirmations? And he says the same exact thing. He's like, I'm smart and I'm brave and I'm strong. And I strategically have him focus on character traits versus, I'm handsome or all these other things. Strong because he's had some challenges in his sports, and not feeling like he was strong was a word that he had used in the past. So I do affirmations, and when he repeats it, I'm like, you certainly are. You are strong, you are brave, and you are smart. And then I'll kiss him and give him a hug and tell him have a good day, and I can't wait to see you. So that time not only sets our start of the day, but it sets their start of the day. So look at it as a download, right? We download all these updates in our computer. So download the updates into your child so they're going off feeling good, as opposed to rushing out of the bed, hurrying out of the bed, trying to get out of the door. We all have those days. God knows I've had them, right? But we want the standard to be where it's a smooth transition, and the start of the day is something that is calm, it's enjoyable, and parents, and I have to stress this, and I'm practicing what I preach, we set the energy for them. We set the energy for them. So if they see us stressed, they see us preoccupied, they're not going to want to engage with that. And then we wonder why our kids don't talk to us. And that's just real talk, right? So I don't see any other questions. And I really appreciated this conversation. I know that we could have delved a lot deeper, but I wanted to give you some very practical tips. And I want to recap a few things, and that is to take care of yourself first. Many times we're so wanting to help other people, because it's not by accident. Many of us are in the helping profession, but we are better helpers when we have good energy, we're taking care of ourselves, we're able to be present, and we're not preoccupied and all the other things that are going on. And then validate, listen to our children, and to help them be prepared for all the things that because think about it, we don't really know what's going to happen this school year either. All right, we have some things that we expect, right, with what we're listening to and what we're watching. But the best gift that we can give to them, especially as parents and supporters of parents and families, is our presence, our energy, our encouragement, our support, and not shaming, not changing reality, not telling people they're going to be okay when we really don't know that. I'm here for you, and no matter what happens in this world, we're going to get through it together, right? So reassuring comments as such. So thank you so much. And you have my contact information. If there's anything else, I'll be happy to help.
Dr. Lacey, first, I do want to say, by the way, I apologize to everyone here. I spelled Dr. Lacey correctly, and I couldn't fix it. It was too close to the webinar to fix it. So it's Lacy. I have one question that came in to me from a text that I thought is pretty interesting. The question is regarding masks that are mandated in some schools for kids as young as 2 to 5 years old. And the question is, how will that play into their psychological and social development? And how can we work with them to minimize that?
The biggest influence, and I think everyone's probably heard it, I'm just going to reiterate it, is us. So how we send the message that they have to wear the mask, our practice around it, our communication around it, our attitude around it, especially at that age, they take our lead. So this is why I'm a big believer is that we have to check ourselves, right? Even if we have different, political views, we have different opinions of what the governor is doing, all this other stuff, and I see it too many times, let that pour into our messaging around our young kids. So we don't have enough data and research to show the long-term psychological effects of this period of time. But what we do know is that the best support is how we communicate what they have to do, why they have to do it, and our encouragement and our attitude around it. You know, so we kind of look at, again, our modeling, our communication, our support, our guidance around the younger age of years, because this is their history. This is their, you know, when they're looking back at this time in life, a lot of them are going through developmental times, especially from that 0 to 5, that download. We primarily are the attachment figures for them and their support system. So that's my quick way to answer it. I mean, we can probably go a lot of different ways with that, but don't underestimate the power of your influence on your family.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Lacey, for doing this. Really, really appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody on the call today for joining us this Friday morning. We really appreciate you and your partnership here in the community. And we look forward to bringing you a lot more trainings. I'm going to follow up with an email with Dr. Lacey's contact information and links to her Facebook and LinkedIn pages, as well as a direct link in case you miss it, to the survey evaluation for the CE. And that's it. Thank you all and have a fantastic weekend. Thank you, Dr. Lacey.
Bye-bye.